The build-up to Philip II's Persian campaign marked the beginning of one of the most decisive transitions in world history. Greece, fractured for generations by internal disputes, had finally been forced into unity by a single man, Philip, king of Macedon. His triumph at Chaeronea did not merely win a battle, it changed the political destiny of the Greek world. Now, with the League of Corinth formed and rival city-states subdued or persuaded into alliance, Philip fixed his gaze toward the greatest enemy Greece had ever known, the Persian Empire. For more than a century, Persia had haunted Greek memory. Its armies had burned Athens, ravaged cities, and forced countless Greeks to flee. Although Greece eventually won the Persian Wars, trauma lingered like a wound in the collective mind of the Hellenic people. Philip understood this psychology well. If the Greeks would not unite for themselves, they would unite for vengeance. He would lead them. Across the Greek world, preparations began. Cities were ordered to contribute ships, soldiers, and supplies. Macedonian engineers developed new forms of siege engines, improved catapults, and restructured battlefield formations. Never before had Greece attempted such a monumental, coordinated military undertaking. But while Philip shaped the external world, a different storm brewed inside the Macedonian royal family, one that would reshape the life of an 18-year-old prince named Alexander. At this moment, Alexander was not the legendary conqueror we remember today. He was a brilliant but volatile youth, shaped by Aristotle's teachings and hardened by the battlefield. His heroic charge at Chaeronea had stunned even the veterans of Philip's army. Yet the glory he earned brought not only admiration, but jealousy, suspicion, and political danger. And it was in the midst of this fragile balance that Alexander received a letter sealed with the symbol he knew too well, the mark of his mother, Queen Olympias. Her message was devastating. Philip had divorced Olympias. Worse, he planned to marry Cleopatra Eurydice, niece of the powerful general Attalus. This new bride came from pure Macedonian lineage. A child born from this union could surpass Alexander in legitimacy, overshadowing the prince whose mother was Epirate, foreign-born, and disliked by Macedonian nobles. Olympias warned him, "Your inheritance, your future, your life, they are all in danger." Alexander knew she was right. The Macedonian court was a nest of vipers, whispers, alliances, and assassins lurking behind silk curtains. Already, many of Alexander's closest companions had been exiled or stripped of power by Attalus' influence. The ground beneath him was shifting. For the first time in his young life, Alexander tasted fear, not of battle, but of politics. And so he returned home. When Alexander arrived in Pella, his instincts proved correct. His allies had been purged from the court. Attalus' influence had grown into a shadow stretching across the palace. Philip himself seemed distant, wary, and unpredictable. The prince sensed that a storm was coming, one that would either destroy him or shape him into something far greater. And then came the wedding, the day everything broke. As nobles from across Macedon filled the hall with wine and praise, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Attalus, emboldened by drink and ambition, raised his cup and proclaimed before the entire gathering, "May the gods bless Philip and Cleopatra with a legitimate heir for Macedon." The insult was unmistakable. Alexander, stunned and furious, hurled his cup at Attalus. What happened next nearly changed history forever. Philip, drunk beyond reason, drew his sword and stumbled toward his own son, attempting to strike him down in front of the horrified court. He fell before reaching Alexander, but the damage was done. At that moment, something inside Alexander hardened. This was not a home for him anymore. This was a battlefield of politics, where even blood ties offered no safety. He knew he had to leave, or be destroyed. What he could not yet know was that exile would become the fire that forged the greatest conqueror of the ancient world. In the days following the disastrous wedding feast, the entire Macedonian court shifted like a storm-tossed sea. What had unfolded between Philip, Attalus, and Alexander was not merely a family quarrel. It was a political earthquake whose tremors would be felt across Greece. The nobles who witnessed the confrontation whispered endlessly, each retelling shaping the future of the kingdom. And at the center of this swelling whirlpool stood an 18-year-old prince who had just witnessed his own father attempt to kill him before a hall of stunned dignitaries. Alexander knew what came next. Accusations, rumors, assassination plots. Court politics had no mercy for prideful young heirs. It was not long before his loyal companions, Ptolemy, Hephaestion, and others, approached him in quiet corners of the palace, urging caution. The mood of the court had shifted overnight. Attalus' faction moved with newfound confidence, emboldened by Philip's remarriage. Philip's new queen, Cleopatra Eurydice, became a focal point of political ambition. To Attalus and his allies, her future son represented a clean slate for Macedon, a true-born Macedonian heir without foreign blood, untainted by Olympias' wild reputation. Alexander now stood as an obstacle, and obstacles in Macedonian politics rarely live long. Sensing the tightening noose, the prince understood that remaining in Pella would only hasten his destruction. The next morning, before the court fully awakened, Alexander quietly departed the palace. Loyal escorts guided him through back roads away from the city. He rode swiftly toward the northern mountains, carrying only his weapons, travel gear, and an unspoken determination to survive. He did not yet know where safety lay. He only knew he had to flee. Meanwhile, Queen Olympias, fierce and cunning, stayed behind. Unlike her son, she did not run. She prepared. Her network of allies, foreign kin, and priestesses whispered through the palace walls, subtly shifting loyalties. For years, she had been underestimated by Macedonian nobility, dismissed as foreign, mystical, unpredictable. But Olympias knew court politics better than any of them. With Alexander gone, she became the silent whirlwind in Philip's court. Too quiet to strike now, but too dangerous to ignore. As Alexander traveled north, the young prince reflected bitterly on the fracture between him and his father. Philip had once praised Alexander's bravery at Chaeronea, boasting that Macedonia had two kings now. But praise had turned to suspicion. Admiration had become rivalry. Their bond, already strained by politics, tempers, and ambition, had snapped under the pressure of the wedding celebration. Still, Alexander could not fully bring himself to hate Philip. He admired him. He feared him. And in a way, he still loved him. But love did not equate to safety, a lesson royalty learned young and often fatally. After several days of travel, Alexander arrived in Illyria, a rugged land of warriors and longtime Macedonian allies. Its rulers had fought beside Philip in earlier campaigns and respected strength and courage above all else. When Alexander arrived at their court, bruised in his pride but unbroken in his spirit, he was welcomed as both guest and potential future king. In Illyria, Alexander was given refuge, yet exile weighed heavily on him. Each night he wondered, would Philip name Cleopatra, Eurydice's future son, as heir? Would Attalus move against Olympias? Would Macedonia forget him? But exile also offered clarity. Free from court webs, Alexander examined his past with newly sharpened eyes. He saw how impulsive he had been, how pride and temper had made him predictable, how his enemies used his youth as a weapon against him. If he were to be king, he realized, he could not simply be brave. He would need to be wise, he would need to be strategic. He would need to understand not just the battlefield, but the minds of men. And slowly, exile transformed him. The rash, fiery boy who had thrown a wine cup at Attalus was fading. A colder, more calculating leader was emerging. Back in Macedonia, Philip's court entered a silent crisis. Whispers carried through marble corridors. Had Philip gone too far with his son? Could Macedonia march to Persia without Alexander? Would nobles split their loyalty between king and prince? Even Philip, proud and stubborn, felt the shift. The absence of Alexander destabilized the already fragile equilibrium of royal politics. Generals who admired Alexander's abilities grew uneasy. Allies feared a succession crisis, just as Philip prepared for the largest military campaign in Greek history. Philip understood what few kings dared admit. A kingdom divided at home cannot conquer abroad, and so pressured by political necessity, military logic, and a flicker of paternal instinct, Philip took the first step toward reconciliation. Envoys were dispatched to Illyria, carrying messages of forgiveness, promises of restored honor, and assurances that Alexander's place as heir remained secure. For the first time in weeks, Alexander saw a path back, not just to Macedonia, but to destiny. He accepted Philip's invitation. But he would not return as the boy who left. He returned as a man shaped by exile, betrayal, and awakening, a man who now understood the cost of power and the price he would one day make the world pay.
I swear to uphold
When Alexander
the unity of the
re-entered Pella
Hellenes,
after months of
the
exile,
legacy of my
the
father.
atmosphere felt different. The palace that once seemed hostile and suffocating now appeared cautious, watchful, yet strangely respectful. The courtiers who once gossiped behind silk curtains now lowered their eyes when the prince passed. Something in his demeanor had changed. His posture was firmer, his voice calmer, his gaze sharper. He no longer carried the restless fire of youth. He carried intention. Philip, too, felt the shift. Their first meeting after the exile was not warm, yet it was monumental. The king studied his son in silence before speaking, not as a father chastising a boy, but as a ruler measuring another potential ruler. "Alexander," Philip said slowly, "Macedon needs unity, and unity requires you at my side." It was an admission Philip rarely made. He needed his son. Alexander bowed, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. For the first time, father and son saw each other not as rivals of ambition, but as partners in destiny. Yet the reconciliation was fragile. The factions that surrounded Philip still simmered with tension. Attalus, confident in his influence through Cleopatra Eurydice, continued to maneuver against Alexander. Olympias, meanwhile, refused to forgive Philip's betrayal, stoking quiet rebellion among those who favored her son. Alexander sensed that Macedonia sat atop a volcano of political danger. But unlike before, he no longer responded with impulsive anger. He responded with strategy. In the weeks following his return, Alexander worked tirelessly to rebuild his alliances. He visited Ptolemy, Hephaestion, Craterus, Perdiccas, and the officers who had supported him since youth.
Indeed.
One by one, he resecured their loyalty, not through demands, but through vision. Alexander spoke to them not as a prince clinging to his inheritance, but as a future commander preparing them for a world-changing campaign. To his closest friend Hephaestion, he confided, "My father will conquer the gateway, but I will conquer what lies beyond it." Philip, meanwhile, accelerated preparations for the Persian invasion. The Macedonian army swelled with recruits. Engineers tested improved siege towers. Artisans crafted new weapons. Envoys secured alliances for the coming expedition. And Alexander, observing everything, studied his father with new insight. He saw that Philip was a genius of war, but careless in politics, blind to how personal rifts could fracture a kingdom. He saw how Attalus' arrogance undermined trust within the court. He saw how Olympias' fury threatened internal stability. Most importantly, he saw that Macedonia needed one mind, one vision, one will if it was to conquer an empire as vast as Persia. A divided Macedonia would fall. A united Macedonia could reshape the world. But unity required something the kingdom had not yet achieved, a clear, undisputed successor. Behind closed doors, Philip wrestled with the dilemma. Cleopatra Eurydice had recently given birth to a son. Her faction whispered that this infant, pure Macedonian, should be the heir. Yet Philip knew the truth. A baby could not lead an army across Asia. Only Alexander had the talent, charisma, and battlefield experience to command what lay ahead. Still, Philip hesitated to publicly reaffirm Alexander as heir. The court factions were too volatile. One wrong move could spark civil war, and so the kingdom remained in quiet tension, a balance of ambition, fear, and unspoken destiny. During this period, Alexander grew in ways neither Philip nor Olympias could have predicted. He trained harder than ever before. He studied maps of Asia, memorizing routes, fortresses, and coastlines. He devoured Homer's tales, imagining himself surpassing Achilles. He learned diplomacy, not just warcraft, recognizing that a conqueror must manage people as skillfully as armies. Most of all, exile had carved into him a new truth. Greatness was not inherited. Greatness was taken. One evening, after weeks of uneasy peace, Philip summoned Alexander to a private chamber. No advisors, no guards, just father and son. Philip spoke of Persia, the vast armies, the wealthy cities, the daunting distances. He described the campaign he had dreamed of for years. Then he placed his hand on Alexander's shoulder and said, When I march east, the world will witness my power. But when you march after me, the world will witness greatness. Alexander felt a surge of purpose. For the first time, Philip acknowledged not merely his ability, but his destiny. But fate, as history often shows, had its own plans. Before Philip could launch the Persian invasion, before final alliances were secured, before Macedonia could witness a father and son conquest, a shadow moved within the palace. A dagger was sharpened, a plan was set in motion, and the world that Philip crafted and Alexander dreamed of inheriting was about to change forever. Alexander did not yet know it, but the exile that nearly destroyed him had prepared him for the crown he was destined to claim.
Soldiers, look upon the future of our kingdom. My son Alexander, and I swear that your bravery... First, dance! Ready the spears. We break camp within the hour.
Yes, Commander. Move, move, move!
We strike here at dawn, cutting off their supply lines. Alexander, you will lead the companion cavalry around the flank. The rest of you, hold the center.
The direct route is too costly. We must draw them out here.
I can take the companion cavalry across the riverbed by dawn.
Risky, but it may work.
Form up by the main banner. We ride out within the hour. Move! Quickly now! For the king!